Doug, Scott, welcome to the Selling with Lori show. I'm so excited to have both of you here to help our viewers understand ADUs and their potential for homeowners. Doug Huberman is here with 33 years of real estate experience as a property manager, asset manager, and turnaround consultant and principal. You bring wealth and knowledge to the table. I'm very blessed that you are here. And we have Scott's Dinovitz. He is a multifaceted real estate executive and project leader who excels in managing development projects, and your expertise in navigating the complexities of real estate is invaluable. So I would love to start with you, Scott, and basically let's just start with the basics.
Sure.
What exactly is an ADU?
Well, an ADU stands for Accessory Dwelling Unit and is basically another home, if you will, on your property. A small house. It has a kitchen, bathroom, bedrooms, and they are usually smaller than the main house. There are state rules that allow those types of units to be put onto the property now. So we're here to talk about that with you.
Great, and I know that I've been personally seeing there's been so much interest around ADUs. Is that going to pick up as we're moving forward in 2025?
Yes, the ADU ordinances have really accelerated development in the Los Angeles area in general, and is going to continue to expand as people start learning more about it. So it's thank you for having me on here, by the way.
Oh, of course.
It's something that's every homeowner should really consider. But Doug and I are going to talk about when it's appropriate to put those on there.
Yes, I was actually.
Well, and then also I was just going to say that an ADU is not an ADU. There's actually different kinds, and that's one of Scott's expertise is the different types of ADUs you can have and develop, and also the types that you can combine on the same property. So maybe
Sure.
you could
talk about that a little bit. Sure, happy to. So there's basically three types of ADUs. There's a detached ADU, so it's completely separate from your home. So it looks like a pool house or something like that. There is an attached ADU, so it's actually attached to your own house, but it has a separate entrance. And there's what's called a junior ADU. So within your home, you can put a separate unit, but it has one front door. So you go through your main front door, and then you would go into the junior ADU through a common hallway. So there's three types.
And Doug, how would one know whether or not if an ADU is right for you?
Well, there's two things you have to always bear in mind when you're even considering the idea of adding residences to your property. The first would be just because the government says that you can do it doesn't mean that you should. I have through each of our ventures, I have seen plenty of properties where the value has been added to by doing an ADU, and I've seen just as many where our clients have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and they've actually diminished the value. So that's number one. Number two is there's a big difference between you're doing an ADU to create a family compound. And you want to have multi-generational presence of your family. You want a place for your parents, grandparents, or even children to live because housing is so expensive, versus you're doing an ADU because you want to increase or maximize rental income. So anything we discuss, you have to bear in mind those considerations. But once you've done that, what you have to really think about is physically what works and what doesn't work.
That's very important, extremely important.
Yes. So for example, if you have a corner lot, because then you can have access to the different units off of different streets. Because one of the primary things you want to do, unless it's a family compound, is preserve the privacy and the sense of you're in a home for the primary residence. And so a corner lot's great because the ADU can have an entrance here and the main house here. Or if you have a very wide but shallow lot, again, that works very well because you can divide it this way, and even though the access is off the same street, they're not impeding on each other. Whereas if you have a deep lot that's narrow,
Is that with like
there's-
one home in
you
in
have a
front?
home in the front, home in the
And
back.
then a home in the back.
Right, and every time the people in the back are trying to access it,
Then you see them walk on the
right,
side.
you're violating the privacy and the sense of a home, and almost always the existing house is the one in the front.
Right.
And so when you see people disregard that and just add ADUs, kind of willy-nilly, many times what happens is, yes, you get the rent from the ADU, but now you have a difficult time renting, or you have to accept significantly less money for the house in the front. So
that's
it's
interesting. I never
really
thought about it like
important
that.
to think about the physical. Another one that we've seen work very, very well is a pie. So you have a main house, you have a pie-shaped lot, and you can take a sliver like this, put, depending on the municipality, 5 or 6 foot fence between them. So the main house still has the main residence, but it has a private yard.
I see.
And then the ADU, which is a smaller structure, typically maximum of 1,200 square feet, has an entrance, the smaller home, and its own private yard. So it's very, very important to know what you're trying to do. We recently were involved with a project where we advise. So we strenuously advised our client that the pie shape worked. They built the ADU, worked great. Excellent income, wonderful tenant, long-term occupancy. And then they came to us and they said, we want to turn the garage into an ADU. And we told them, do not do that, because people who are renting a single-family home, one, they expect to have a garage, even if it's not to put their cars in.
Yes,
a lot
just
of people,
for the extra
Just the
storage.
extra space.
we've all accumulated
lot
enough
of
stuff,
stuff.
right,
Yeah.
that we want a
Yes.
garage. So that's a negative. But the other is, if it was a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath home, typically you're going to have a family situation or a roommate situation because of that. And a lot of people who are renting that family home don't want to have a neighbor that they don't know, they don't control, right, near other family members.
Yeah.
So you can't overdo it. And that's the most important thing. Consider the physical aspects of your property if it's existing. Is it wide? Is it pie-shaped? Is it a corner
narrow.
lot? And then also a lot of people who are out there are going, okay, there's an opportunity to increase income. I'm going to buy properties suitable for ADUs. It'd be the same thing. You want to avoid anything where building the ADU would significantly diminish the sense of privacy and the sense of it being a family home. Now there's an exception that Scott can definitely talk to, and there's now commercial ADUs. You can have a 4-unit or let's say an 8-unit, small apartment building, and there's now regulations to where you can add ADUs to them. Well, apartment living, you've already accepted that you're going to have neighbors near you, and you're going to see
Common
people
walls.
coming to
Exactly.
going, in which case that becomes less of a consideration.
I see.
So I don't know I tried to give you just a sprinkling of it.
Yes, you sure did.
And there's some mitigating measures too that you can do, like adding landscaping, having separate entrances, having a different driveway approach. So there's some things that you can do on a narrower lot where you could possibly make a smaller private yard for the main house and then have it completely separate so it feels separate. There's things that you can do. It's not ideal, but it definitely would help.
So if
the
you're
situation.
Yeah. So if you're in a neighborhood that flag lots are typical,
Yes.
then you can make it feel like that by
Right,
putting in
similar flag lot, yeah.
separate driveway that goes along the side, and you have the wall there.
Or even a separate entrance. So if there's common parking, you could have just a kind of a completely separate entrance that's more private to the back. Again, it will have separation for the two people that are living there.
And what do homeowners need to know about, the permits, timelines, and I could imagine like the costs of, constructing an ADU. I mean, there's some that are already like prefabbed, right?
Sure.
And then there's others that, require a little bit more of, what's the word I'm looking for?
Well, they're built on site. They're stick
built
built,
on
yeah.
site, yes.
Yeah, there's two types. There's a lot of manufacturers that do prefabricated units that you can actually purchase. They literally deliver them with drywall and everything finished, and you can actually set them on site. It's really an amazing thing like boxable. There's a couple of different ones that are really interesting.
You
to look
literally
at.
pour the foundation and they bring it in with a giant crane.
And they just set it on
They just
site.
plop it.
Absolutely.
Oh,
And so
okay.
you can order it with different finishes, and that's really kind of a nice thing to do because it cuts down the time of construction considerably. Now they do have to ship it, so shipping costs and different things that you have to understand. And also, if you can get a crane, people have to understand that you have to be able to get a crane, a big crane, into the property and be able to do that. So some properties aren't suited for that.
I see, because of the electrical
Wires.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of different things that you have to look at, and obviously they're trying hard. They will come out and see you, the people that build these, and they will assess your property and make sure that it's suitable for that. Now, if you can't do that or you don't want to, you want to do something more custom.
Custom, that was the
Yeah,
word I was
sure,
looking for
custom.
earlier. Oh my gosh, yes,
you would
custom.
hire. There's several architects. There's many architects that are familiar with the ADU regulations, and you can design your own accessory dwelling unit the way you want it. Whether it's
Yeah.
for, if you're doing it for rent or you're doing it for your parents or your kids, you can design it however you want to. You can have an attached garage to it. So there's many different ways that you can do that. There is something that's very interesting that's out now. The state has a grant program that you can apply for, and I can give you the particulars on it later, up to $40,000 to pay for plans, permits, fees for an ADU, which is really nice of the government.
Yeah.
You actually have to apply. There's certain income thresholds that you have to meet to do that. But it does give you some money to explore that and help pay for those costs.
And is that just in California?
It's just in California, yep.
And what about, I know there's the SB9,
Sure.
and then how you can actually split a lot
Yes.
to actually have a larger home versus the smaller,
Yes.
accessory dwelling units. So Scott, I know that you have a couple projects right now that you are working on.
Yes.
Would you mind sharing the particulars on that and how a homeowner could move forward if they're looking to go in that direction?
Sure. So SB 9 is a state law that's come out where in certain instances, not all instances, you're able to split the lot basically in half. When they say half, the maximum is 60% of the total area of the lot. So if you had a 10,000 foot lot, you'd have 6,000 square feet on one side, 4,000 feet on the other. That's the maximum you could split the lot, if that makes sense. And you're allowed to put another house on the property and another, actually two more ADUs now. There's a new state law. They went from one ADU to two ADUs. Again, as Doug mentioned, not necessarily a great idea if you don't have the space or it becomes an issue, but you do have that option now. This is done ministerially, so that means that there's no real approvals other than the actual submittal of the documentation to do that within your jurisdiction. Now, every city has their own ordinances that you have to heed to in order to get this done. So there's setbacks for side yard setbacks, front yard setbacks, heights, all kinds of different things that you have to concern yourself with when you actually pull that permit. So you have to go to the local jurisdiction that you're located in and get all that information before you actually do an SB 9 lot split. One of the other requirements is someone of ownership, at least 25% ownership has to maintain, or you have to be on one of the two properties for a period of 3 years. So there's an affidavit you have to fill out and
Okay.
agree to. So you have to remember that you have to do that. The other thing is you're allowed to rent the other, when you split the lot off, you're allowed to rent it, or you can actually sell that completely separately.
So would they have like a own separate address?
Yes, separate address and separate everything. Yeah,
Separate utilities.
separate utilities,
Okay.
everything. So it's kind of an interesting program. We're doing it right now with Doug, and in Pasadena right now. So it's a single family home, and we've decided to put another house in the back and only one ADU. Because it was just appropriate, again, for privacy and things like that. We had shown the project with another attached ADU, and the owner decided that they wanted to keep it more private for the back owner. So we decided on 3 total units.
Right. And that gets back to just because you can doesn't mean that you should. Another consideration you always want to make when you're looking at these types of projects is, so you take a single family lot with 1 house, right? You split it, now you have 2 structures. Now you do 2 ADUs on each. All of a sudden you have 6 residences on the same single family lot. Where's everybody going to park?
Right.
Yeah.
And unless you're living in an area that's completely walk to,
Yeah.
and you might be able to get away with it in old Pasadena, where you got the Gold Line station right there, but
Right.
where's the single family homes
But it's
in that
California,
area?
and
It's California.
everybody drives in
Everybody's
California.
car-centric.
It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if you can even walk.
I get that all the
drive.
time. People ask me like, well, we don't need to add parking. I'm like, be realistic.
Yeah.
Everybody drives their car, especially if you don't live in a town, you live outside of town. You've got to have a car and parking. So.
Well, maybe with parking, in regards to parking, you can get those structures that, that are double up.
Oh, they do have those. And,
Right?
and in fact,
We've done
35
those, yeah.
Raymond.
Oh, you've done those?
I've done those, yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
we've done those, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think those are just fabulous.
There's parking lifts, yeah.
Like parking lifts, and it's really good space saving.
Sure.
So.
But you still have to figure
But-
out a way for access. And if
Oh,
you
that's
go
right.
from-
And so if you have
you
somebody
go-
underneath you, you can't
Right.
really.
Is it your
bring
neighbor or
yeah.
is it
your
just your
neighbor?
second
Yeah.
car?
Yeah.
And then you also need to be able to pull the car out while you bring the other one down and out, and then
Yeah.
bring the other one
Maneuver
back
it
in.
around.
But again, these are all the types of creative things that you can pursue once you've gone through the process of figuring out, is an ADU for you based on the physical aspects, the neighborhood itself. If you're in a neighborhood with duplexes and fourplexes, even though you have a single family home, if you add an ADU, it still fits the scheme because everybody in the neighborhood is used to multiple residences on a lot. If you're in a neighborhood where it's all single family homes, then you really have to think about the privacy concerns and the access concerns, because people considering renting your house or your ADU are comparing it to other houses in the neighborhood that have that privacy component. So there's no right answer. There's 31 flavors of ice cream at Baskin-Robbins for a reason.
Yes.
Right? And so you
Yes.
have to find the right flavor for yourself
Yeah.
and for your property.
Okay, great.
A few other things to talk about with SB9 and also the ADUs in a severe high fire hazard area. Cities have the right to actually restrict the number of units that you can put on your property. So with everything that's going on with the fires, I think that's needs to be taken into consideration.
That and also landmark designations. cities.
Landmark,
Yeah.
absolutely, and different things like that. Now, you're under any circumstance, you are allowed to put one ADU up to 800 square feet. Again, with the high fire hazard area, you have to talk to local officials about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Okay. And last question, pitfalls. Any potential pitfalls that people should, be aware of?
Well, I think the major one is overbuilding just because you can. And as I said in the one example where they turned the garage into an ADU, it ended up a house that had typically released in 2 to 3 weeks took 4 months to find a tenant for. And if you're doing this for an income purpose, it's not how high your rent is, it's how high your rent is times how many months you actually collect it. So I think the number one concern is make sure you're not adversely affecting the rentability of the main house that you're starting with just to get a little income from an ADU. That'd be my number one caution.
I think I agree with you. It's and more about privacy too. I think if you're a homeowner and you decide to put an ADU for rental purposes, or even if your mother-in-law's out back, if you like your mother-in-law or not, that's important. So you might have to make sure that you're keep it private and those types of things. I think other than that, it's a great opportunity for people to either get more income or have a place for their family to live. I mean, let's face it, it's very expensive to live here. And if you can put those extra units on there, you don't have the extra land cost, right? So you've already paid for the land with the house. It's just the cost of the ADU itself. Well, it's nice.
And there's considerable amount of literature on the fact that 100 years ago, even maybe 75 years ago or 50 years ago, multi-generational housing was very common. you'd have the grandparents and the parents and even adult children living together. That kind of disintegrated and it became, every generation for themselves. With the high cost of living and how competitive housing is, I think what's being written about is probably true, which is we're going to start seeing a return to more multi-generational housing where adult children, they go away to college, they get their first job, but they can't afford living. So I think you'll see the ADU or urban lot split being used to create a place where the elderly parents can live, your generation can live, and even your adult children can live. In which case you'll design it differently, as we discussed in the front. But I think we're going to see a lot of that, not just the pure income-driven ADU and urban lot split.
I think there's one other consideration that people need to understand, and that's the financing. Because if you have a single-family lot and you split it off, you actually need to talk to your lender if they're going to release the back lot. So what that means is when you originally purchased the home, there's a legal description that comes with it, right? So, and that mortgage covers the entire property. So when you split the lot off, you actually have to ask the lender if they're going to allow you to release that back lot. So a lot of times they won't, and you have to actually refinance. So that's something to consider when you're doing this too. People don't think about that, but it's important.
And the same thing, actually, not just for mortgages, but for insurance. That if you're insured and you have a mortgage as a single family home, if you're going to turn it into multifamily and or be renting it out so it's commercial, all of a sudden you have to make sure that you have a different insurance policy. And it may well be that your lender who lent on it because they love the residential nature of a single family home loans, they may not want their loan converted to something that's commercial. So then all of a sudden you're looking for a new mortgage, new insurance on top of plans and permits. The other thing I just wanted to throw in the mix is we talked about the two extremes, one being the prefab and the other the custom stick built. A lot of cities, including the city of LA, if you go to their website, they actually have a catalog of pre-approved ADU plans.
That's a good.
That get you streamlined.
Yeah, I know the city of Pasadena has two different concepts.
And now they're just starting to really build and fill theirs out. So if you're stuck for ideas or you're looking for things that will have an easier path through approval, that's always a good place to start.
And those are over-the-counter permits, which is amazing. So you can actually just go down.
So the
building
timing
permit.
is just like
There's no review.
No
It's
review.
just you walk in, you say, I want number 3 on page 2, and they just go like
They
this.
stamp it, and you pay the fee, and you're off to the
You're
races.
off.
Yeah.
Wow. So Doug and Scott, these are fantastic insights that you are sharing for our homeowners here today watching the show. So thank you so much for sharing your expertise.